Hello, welcome to the Real News Network. Did we play opening animation? I don't think so. Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Paul Jay. Welcome to our live open mic at the Real News. This is sort of an experiment where viewers and members get a chance to talk directly to our audience, ask me questions, or sometimes when we do this, we'll have some guests, but for our first go, it's going to be me plus some member panelists and you. This, of course, is part of our $200,000 campaign, matching campaign to try to raise $200,000 by the end of the year. So every dollar you give will be matched. And we will get started right away. So the format here is we have some panelists on webcams. You can call in with questions. And of course, we hope you're going to call in and donate. So let me give you the phone number, first of all, if you want to call in with a question. And the question phone number is 1-888-543-1405. I'll do that again. 1-888-543-1405. And in a few minutes, I'll give you the phone number for donating. Of course, you can just click donate here, which there should be a donate button somewhere around this video player. But now we're going to go to our first member, viewer, panelist, and he's Bill Papineau. Bill, are you there? Hello, Bill.
Hello.
Hi. So just tell us a little bit about yourself and where you are, and then your question or comment.
I'm a theologian. I live in Prescott Valley, Arizona, and I'm enjoying this nice weather.
Okay. What's your question or comment?
Well, I follow the Real News because of the work of staff people like Leah Tarachansky, Jahan Hafetz, and the interviews you do with sources like Tom Ferguson, Bill Black, Leo Panich, Larry Wilkerson, because they provide insight and perspective on important issues that are simply not available anywhere else with such focus and regularity. In my conversations with acquaintances, I'm often surprised that people don't know about the Real News, or they indicate that they're resistant to checking it out because they believe the internet is by nature radical or distorted. And so I'm curious as to what plans or ideas you have to raise wider public awareness of the Real News and allow its journalism to speak for itself to a larger audience that I believe is badly in need of more information about the issues that confront us.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's something we're grappling with all the time. Our strategy, I guess, is you can on two basic paths. One is we're hiring, and I hope if you click donate more, we're going to be able to hire this person faster, you being everyone out there. We're going to hire a full-time marketing person, and we're going to raise some money and put some money into straightforward conventional marketing. I mean, one of the secrets of the internet is that not very much goes viral, really. What drives traffic really is old-style marketing. Both online marketing and to a large extent offline. Some of the big successes on the internet are actually things that make waves or get noise or marketing, whether it's paid or unpaid, in conventional old media. I mean, that was the big secret that came out of the Howard Dean campaign when one of the first big explosions of internet supposedly going viral, that we got to know some of the people that ran the Howard Dean campaign. And their success mostly came from exposure they were getting in conventional media that came back to people that then went online. So we have to get a lot better at marketing online, both through social media and even paid advertising. And then we also have to get a lot better about getting our stories into conventional media. So we're going to be working a lot more at getting press releases out, getting to journalists, and finding journalists within conventional media that are willing to sort of break with the official narrative on things. But the other strategy we have is to start going into different cities, starting with one, and that one's going to be Baltimore to begin with, and go local. We can have a lot more impact in a local news market than trying to compete nationally right now, we think. It's very hard, unless you've got significant money, to have a national imprint, or at least it takes a long time. And we've been growing. You know, our views now, we think, are somewhere in the range of about 4 or 5 million views a month. That's not individual visits, that's views. In terms of actual people, it's probably, maybe a third of that are unique visits, or unique people. We are growing, and our stories get seen more and more. But we think by going local in a local market, we accomplish two things. One is we can have more impact in that market because we can focus more resources on a specific city, both in terms of marketing and social media, paid and unpaid. But the other thing, and maybe the most important thing, is the Real News was always about speaking to ordinary people. While we want people that are already politicized and are, in the blogosphere or in internet news reading, it's an important audience for us, and we do think we should be having more impact than we are in that audience. Our real objective was always to talk to ordinary people, and for most ordinary people, news is local. It's more about their direct experience than it is about indirect experience and geopolitical stories, even national stories sometimes seem somewhat abstract to people when they're just fighting very hard to get through the day, fighting for survival. So we're going to take Baltimore and we're going to create a new format, which is to take local problems like in Baltimore, why are so many houses boarded up, or it could be youth, and why are so many young people going to jail, the extent to which racism plays a role both in the criminal justice system and pervasively throughout much of the economy in Baltimore. We're going to look at unemployment. I mean, all the issues that are really national issues, but all show up in Baltimore, but with the specificity of that city. And we're going to do investigative journalism to answer people's questions. For example, we sat on the front porches with some people in East Baltimore, and we asked, okay, you assign us a story, like you're our editors. What do you want to know? And one of the women on the porch pointed to all these boarded up houses all around where she lived and said, well, who owns all these houses? This is a great question. Number two, she said, and if they're planning to redevelop this someday, why aren't they at least renting these houses out to low-income families now? Which is a great question. Or we also obviously want to know, how can we have more security on the streets? How can we have security without throwing our young people into jails? So we're going to do a piece of investigative journalism, and if you look on the site now, you'll see a section called the Real Baltimore, and this is the beginning of this kind of work. And then we're going to organize town halls, and I'm not sure if everyone else is starting to hear an echo, but I am. Then we're going to organize town halls where we invite people from the community to come and have a public policy debate with us about how to solve this problem. What public policy is in the interest of ordinary people? Because as viewers of the Real News know, we have understood that this is a class society and that news is not, cannot be detached from that. The idea that there's a 99% and a 1% is not just first of all, it's not a new concept, and number two, it has very much to do with how you do journalism. Are you doing journalism for the 1% or the 99%? For example, economic news, if you look at it, is almost all for investors. Well, we want to talk about what public policy will solve these problems. So we think in terms of the outreach and impact of the Real News, we'll start to make deeper, broader inroads in a city, so like Baltimore. And then once we start the movement in Baltimore, we want to do the same thing in other cities. And then sort of take a national audience or North American audience city by city, and maybe globally too, so that we can start establishing this local issues with a systemic national perspective. Bill, did you have anything you wanted to follow up with?
Oh, that's great. That's what I wanted to hear. It's like music.
All right, well, hang on, because we may come back to you. Hang on with us. Well, let's go to our second panelist. And the second panelist, let me get in front of me, I see Bill. Where's my second panelist? Someone needs to come help me here. This is not obvious to me. Okay, hang on. Well, let's switch to our second panelist here. Somebody named Jessica needs to get here and tell me where my second panelist here. Just come here and tell me. Just show me. Come here, Jessica. Where is there? Say hello, Jessica. You can. Hi. Hey, this is Jessica.
Hi, everyone.
Come say hello. So Jessica is one of our new producers. She's our coordinating, supervising producer. She's been with us almost 2 months now, and she's helping organize all this. And she prepared these notes, and she's got to tell me who is the second panelist. I do not see.
Harriet Draper.
Where is this name?
On your PDF.
I need it here. Okay, Harriet Draper. Hello, Harriet.
There.
All right, let me do a little intro for Harriet. Harriet is a new member of the board of directors of the Real News. She's a documentary filmmaker, and she lives in New York, and she lives in Mexico, and she's lived in Paris. She is a global citizen. Thanks for joining us, Harriet.
My pleasure.
So talk a little bit, you have a question or a comment or both?
Well, in the terribly violent images that we're seeing on the news these days, I have been noticing how people are being beaten around the head. I mean, really beaten. In Egypt with steel pipes, in the United States with those, I don't know, wooden batons. And for years I've been reading articles about the incredible damage that you can do to the frontal lobes beating people around the head. And I don't think our police have any idea how much real damage they are doing to the people that they are beating.
Well, they may know, seeing as they're wearing helmets.
They're wearing helmets, but if you watch the news, they try and break bones, but they also really, really bash people around the head. And there have been many reports about and videos of police bashing youngsters in, juvenile detention, and they hit them around the head. The research on that shows that it makes people unable to, it confuses their emotions, it makes them unable to concentrate. It is future damage for those people that is very serious. And those people who are in prison who've been beaten around the head will not be able to live normal lives. There are other studies that show that 60% of the juvenile detainees have been beaten as children around the head. I just think it would be good to make sure that the police or the army or whoever is in charge of beating people understand that they are creating a very big social problem in the future.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I mean, one of the things that we want to do in terms of new show ideas is two shows. One we're thinking of calling Military Intelligence, which is by and for soldiers, and sort of the idea of what are we fighting for and what happens when we come home. And the other thing we're thinking of starting in Baltimore is a show which is for and by police people, men and women, and very directly dealing with the issues of ordinary police in terms of, they're thrown onto the front lines of what you could call class struggles. They're thrown onto the front lines of people who are so badly affected by the society, and much of the reaction to that is violent and is criminal. And the police are the ones that are supposed to deal with it, and they're never supposed to ask what are the underlying reasons for any of this. They're supposed to just deal with it. And in Baltimore, a lot of that dealing with it is, not even just arresting people, which of course they do a lot, but it's also they feel like they're put in a position they have to just control people. And that has to do with, going after people on the streets and rousting them and sometimes beating them. And there's a lot of violence between police and young people. But from the point of view of the police men and women, they feel like they're the only ones that are sort of between, quote unquote, the civilized world and chaos. And it's not without some truth to it. Some. But of course, without any wider context. So one of the things we think we can do as the Real News about this is start talking directly to police people about these kinds of issues. And it's very interesting, if you look in our section, The Real Baltimore, one of the stories about youth in the criminal justice system, Megan and David, who did that story, they interviewed a couple of policemen, women, and they both spoke against putting young people into jails. And they both spoke against especially putting juveniles and charging them as adults and then putting them into adult prisons. And both of them said all you get out of that is tougher, more hardened more, if you want. I don't think they use the word, but they kind of implied more sociopathic kinds of criminals that come out of jail. So I think like this issue of hitting people over the heads and the damage that's done, that's connected to a whole issue of how do we start speaking to police and trying to kind of counter the pressure on police to simply be, goon squads. There's a lot of cops that, they became cops, I guess, just because they needed a job. Or maybe they had some sense of social mission. Certainly a lot of soldiers join the army because they have some sort of sense of, doing something for the greater good. And, they kind of believe the idea that you go to Iraq or somewhere to defend democracy and such. A lot of people believe these things. So I think the issue you raise, it's actually quite profound in terms of what role we might be able to play in that.
I think the police need training. I think somebody has to understand the effects of what they are doing. And well, I mean, I'm thinking about Occupy Oakland, when all those police went rushing in and that fellow was shot in the head with a tear gas canister and people were being beaten. You can see it in all the videos. It's so counterproductive for the future of our country to have damaged people. So I think there has to be an awareness of police tactics.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I think that would be really good to maybe start in Baltimore and talk to them about their police, about how they're trained and what they think about it. Yeah,
it's a good point. We'll have to do it. We can do an investigative piece just on this whole question of beating around the head and what the training is for that. We saw at the Toronto G20 a lot of deliberate beating around the head by police with batons, a lot of head injuries. And it implies that the training is in fact to do that, not to not do that.
Exactly.
It's not that police are just beating people around the head. It implies that at the very least they've been told it's okay to do that. I mean, we know in Toronto and many of the other big protest sites, but particularly Toronto G20, everything was being videotaped. Every time a cop hit a protester, the cop knew it was on tape, and yet they did it with impunity. They knew there were not going to be repercussions, and that had to be part of a culture of training to know that's true. I mean, you see the same thing happening in Cairo, where, I mean, even much worse in Cairo. There's terrible targeting of heads with batons and beating, and some of the footage we've been seeing from Jihan and Reed and Danya, who's over in Cairo now too. Our Cairo Bureau's been producing amazing stuff. Hang on, Harriet, and we'll come back to you. And now we're going to go to, I'm not sure if it's on video or is it a phone caller? It's a phone caller. Ray, are you there?
Yes, hi, Paul.
Hey, Ray, how are you? So introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are and where you are, and then make your question or comment.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Ray Abalea. I'm calling in from San Francisco, California, and I'm the co-director of Code Pink Women for Peace.
Great. Thanks for joining us, Ray. What would you like to say?
Well, I wanted to commend you and the Real News for the incredible in-depth coverage that you do of the Real News, precisely that. And I think it's rare these days that we get to hear these investigative reports, unfortunately, given the spin of mainstream media. So just off of the conversation I overheard you just having, I'm curious what the Real News plans are for continuing the excellent coverage of the Egyptian Revolution and the brutal repression, and also for covering the Occupy movement in the spring and the months to come.
Sure. Well, in terms of Egypt, we've made a big commitment to establish a Cairo bureau. So it's a big deal for an organization as small as we are, but we think the Egyptian Revolution is one of the most important stories or fronts of struggle, if you will. So Jihan Hafiz is now full-time in Cairo. Danya Nedar, who was working with us here, is now in Cairo. Jihan's colleague and partner, Reed Lindsay, is in Cairo. So we're really going to be, and we also have freelancers who are working in Egypt as well. So we're going to be focusing a lot on what's happening in Cairo, and we're going to particularly dig into the workers' movement in Cairo, because I think that's what's so important about the Egyptian Revolution, is that this really has at its heart Egyptian workers, and even certainly students and young people have played a very important role. But it's the Egyptian workers that are going to make or break this revolution. And the fight that's been going on for minimum wage, the strike struggles that are taking place in Egypt, we've done some coverage of. It's gotten almost no coverage anywhere else, I think. But there's hundreds of strikes, many national strikes, including bus drivers who were driving their buses around, picking people up, but as part of their strikes wouldn't charge anyone to get on the bus. University professors are on strike side by side with cleaners at universities. It is a real revolutionary situation there. And it's, of course, a very serious counter-revolution taking place, both from the military regime, the Egyptian elite, which is very, very wealthy, and the Muslim Brotherhood, which seems to be more or less playing ball with the military. But within that, there are divisions. A lot of the young Muslim Brotherhood activists, their hearts are with the real revolutionary movement. So what that means to the Muslim Brotherhood is a big issue. So we're going to be doing a series very soon about the Muslim Brotherhood. We're going to be doing a series about the attitude of Egyptians and the Egyptian working class towards Islam. And the other thing we hope to be doing very soon is create an Arabic section of the website so that these stories can be seen by Egyptians in Arabic, because there's not a lot of independent media that Egyptians have access to. As far as the occupation movement goes, both in the U.S. and in Canada and in Europe, we hope to be doing a lot more. As you heard earlier, we're going to be doing a lot of focus on Baltimore, but we want to hire at least one, if not two, full-time journalists that do nothing but cover across the country the occupation movement. So certainly we have a freelancer or two working in New York now. Gesso has been doing some great work, I think, in New York. We want to have one or two journalists that can actually just roam around the country wherever there's some real motion. And we hope to do something which is to sort of take advantage of our strength, which is on the analytical side, and help bring something to these movements where we can give more depth to the understanding of the people involved and the people are trying to communicate with about the roots of the economic crisis. You know, what are the real solutions? And so it's sort of in combination for us is covering the actions in the street and trying to add context analysis, and particularly historical analysis, because a lot of the young people, as a result of our brilliant school system, have very little idea about the history of the last 100, 120, 130 years. This issue of banks and finance and speculation and the role of finance in the economy and particularly in the politics. This ain't nothing new, and this doesn't start with the undoing of Glass-Steagall. This goes back to late 19th, early 20th century, and certainly gives rise to the Great Depression and has a lot to do with the development of the wars and such. So we want to bring a lot more historical analysis to the Occupy movement. But what would you like to see us do more of or better at?
Well, all of that sounds great, and I would just stress the role of women on the front lines of both and all of these struggles, and I've been particularly inspired by seeing the women in Cairo, in Tahrir Square, from Asma Mahfouz and onward, who are just courageously leading this movement and taking part in it, and then more recently seeing the horrible, brutal repression of women and assault of women by the military. So I think we have a lot to learn from the Egyptian women.
Yeah, any minute now, like I think it's sometime in the next half hour, Jahan and Danya are filing a new report about the March of Women that took place, I guess it was yesterday. And so that report should be up almost as we speak. But yeah, I think it's very important that both Egypt and here, how much women are at the forefront of this.
Right, and something that we've observed at Code Pink is how a lot of the occupies around the country, while they're doing fantastic work, often it's white men who are on the mic or the bullhorn or facilitating the general assemblies, and so we feel we have an important role to play around ensuring safer spaces for women to camp out, and also empowering women to speak out and to play an integral role in the leadership, not just being behind the scenes in the organizing, but also on the front lines and being part of the face of the movement. And I think it was exciting to see that Time magazine named the protester the person of the year and had a woman on the cover. But it definitely we need to continue to build skills and build capacity. And like you're saying, Paul, this isn't a new story around the economy. It's also not a new story around protests. That we know there's been protest movements time and again, and I think we have a lot to learn from the historical context of those struggles as well, whether it's looking at the battle in Seattle and the WTO struggle in the 90s, the Vietnam War protests, and on and on.
And something you and others watching can help us with. We are looking for women economists, particularly economists, political economists that can give historical context. A lot of our experts that we've been finding are white guys, and they're great, but we really need to go beyond just white guys that are great. And so if anyone knows of women that are doing good work, either in terms of the global economy or nationally, and can add the kind of analysis and context that we need, just send us contact@therealnews.com. We need suggestions. So thanks very much for calling in, Ray.
Thanks so much for having me on and for all the great work that you do.
Thanks very much. Okay, so now I'm going to do a donation pitch because that's part of what this show is all about. So if you want to donate, obviously click donate here. We're getting close to our $200,000 target, but we're not there yet. We really need you to support and click donate or phone. If you want to phone, the number is 866-396-4231. Again, that's 866-396-4231. That's the donation phone number. And if you want to Twitter, we're at hashtag, that's what that pound sign, I guess, and The Real News, hashtag The Real News. And if you're looking for us on Facebook, it's just, I guess, Facebook, and look up for The Real News channel. But most importantly, you go to our website, because I guess you're there already, but therealnews.com. And the best way to donate is just click donate or phone again, 1-866-396-4231. And I'll just give you the phone number for phoning in with questions for the live show, 888-543-1405. Okay, where am I going next? I'm going to Bert Shook, I believe. Bert is on a webcam, are you not, Bert? Hello, Bert. Okay, Bert's not there. We're going to see so what are we going to do next, guys? Bert is not apparently lost. I see Robert Naiman. Is Robert online? Robert Naiman, there's Robert. Hello, Robert.
Hi, Paul.
Robert is, let me get this right. You're the senior editor or executive director of Just Foreign Policy?
Policy director of Just Foreign Policy.
Policy director. So, listen, thanks so much. You're very busy with your own work, and you've taken time for us. We really appreciate it.
It's good to be with you.
So, do you want to make a comment? Make a question?
Yeah. Two, really, if you'll permit me. One general and the other a little more specific. The general comment, in terms of what I'd love to see, is more focus on Washington policy fights that aren't being highlighted or even reported on by the mainstream media. So, for example, recently the Senate passed an amendment calling for President Obama to expedite U.S. military withdrawal from Afghanistan. That didn't get much media attention at all, including alternative media. Whereas I can just say from my own experience as a foreign policy analyst, my phone's ringing off the hook from people who want to talk to me about North Korea. I don't even follow Korea, but I think it's a symptom, as I perceive it, of kind of herd mentality that affects even alternative media that tend to see their remit as follow whatever the mainstream media is focusing on, but give a different perspective. And I would love to see alternative media doing less of that, because we didn't really learn anything about North Korea in the last couple of days. So I think a lot of that focus is wasted. But there is a lot to learn about policy fights that are happening in Washington across a range of issues that the mainstream media is not really focusing on. So that's my general
Yeah,
question.
let me respond a bit to that, and then you can go further. So, I mean, as you can see, we haven't done a story on North Korea because we don't know what we could add to it unless we can find something that really knows what's going on in North Korea. But I agree with you, like more speculation about what the son's going to do versus the father and all the rest. There's nothing we can say about it. In terms of our plans, which I think jive with what you're suggesting we do, because we think it's been a weakness of ours, we have been mostly based in Washington at a little studio we have at the McClatchy newspaper offices. And because we're so small, that's mostly what we've done in Washington, interviews based out of that studio. But we're partly because of changes at McClatchy and partly something we have been thinking we should be doing anyway. We're actually going to move out of there, and we're going to move the emphasis of what we do to Capitol Hill, and we're going to work from Capitol Hill. You know, we're accredited there, and we're going to start trying to like pull back the curtain, pull back the theater, or get beyond the theater, and get to the real conflict of interests that take place in these policy fights, number one. Number two, start to cover more, and maybe you can help us in terms of pointing out things we should be paying attention to, things that are happening that are battles over particular policy that are actually good battles in the sense that there is a side trying to say something that's useful. And three, congressional hearings. Because in fact, often in the testimony at congressional hearings, you get an insight, a window into real policy thinking. And there's a little more openness and honesty there in terms of the internal discussion, because it gets so little coverage in mainstream media. And they think that, often I think they can talk in a way that they think no one's going to really listen to. Well, if we cover these hearings, I think, and sometimes you do get members of Congress and Senate that ask decent questions. But anyway, so I'm agreeing with you, and it'd be great if you could help us in directing more of that.
I think those are all great ideas, and I'm happy to help. We have your staff get in touch with me.
Yeah, we will.
Let me raise my specific idea, and that is that I think there's a really interesting story that the mainstream media is missing right now in the Republican primaries and caucuses, which is that if you look at the poll data, polls came out last week showing Ron Paul leading in the Iowa caucus. But if you look inside the poll, that result is driven by people in the poll who identify themselves as Democrats. When the poll, this public policy polling, the poll asked people to identify themselves, it turned out that Romney was winning hands down among the people who identify as Republicans. What was putting Ron Paul over the top on the poll was people who identified as Democrats and people who voted in the 2008 Iowa Democratic caucus, probably for Obama. So I think this is really interesting that there's this phenomenon of especially anti-war Democrats voting for Ron Paul. And if Ron Paul wins the Iowa caucus, I think anti-war Democrats are going to be the story. And this is a story that I haven't seen anywhere in the mainstream media, and I think that would be an interesting story to have someone, go or call these folks in Iowa who are saying that these anti-war Democrats who say that they plan to caucus for Ron Paul.
Yeah, it's a very interesting story. Well, we will do that. And let me add another thing to that, which is we're going to be doing a story soon about polling and how polling on different issues is very, very different than electoral results. And partly we think that is because so many people don't vote or aren't registered to vote, whereas polling takes a general sampling of the population. But one of the things that was done, I believe, my memory was in either an AP or CBS poll, but when we do this story, we'll point it out. But they asked people the question, do you think the American military should use force, A, only when the United States is attacked, or B, when the United States thinks it might be attacked? In other words, preventive strikes. And it was very interesting, 74% only if directly attacked. That's a number that does not jibe with either party's policies or or positioning. So if this poll is to be believed, the anti-war, anti-militarist opinion in the country is far, far ahead of or different than any of the leadership of the political parties. And so maybe some of this is what's bubbling up to the surface in terms of this Ron Paul support, that it really is, whether it's Democrats or some Republicans, it's all about the foreign policy position of Paul. It's not about his domestic issues.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And it shows a key phenomenon that you just described, which is that, there's public opinion is one element, and the other elements. If you look at the way, every Republican presidential candidate, except for Ron Paul, attacked President Obama on the Iraq withdrawal, that wasn't public opinion. Public opinion was 75% for President Obama's decision to withdraw, including the majority of Republicans. So the Republican presidential candidates who attacked President Obama, they weren't doing that to get votes of the public. They were speaking to a different constituency. And I think that's a very interesting dynamic that deserves a lot more scrutiny. And as you said, I think that this, these anti-war Democrats supporting Ron Paul is an example of this, public opinion trying to find a way to express itself in the political system.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much, Robert. And let me just plug your site again. So Robert's at Just Foreign Policy. Is it .com or .org, Robert?
.org. JustForeignPolicy.org. We're
yeah.
non-profit.
Yeah, check out JustForeignPolicy.org. They do great work on foreign policy issues. And I think we're going to play more together, I hope, in the future. So I don't know if you can hang on, Robert, or not, but we're going to go on to another caller. So we have a phone caller now, and this is Christina. And Christina, could you tell us a little bit about who you are and where you are, and then make your question or comment?
Hi there. Give me 1 second. Blowing the volume here. Okay. Hi there. I'm Christina. I'm calling you from the United States. I'm not sure. I think you probably have some international callers today.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to...
Just what city are you in? What city are you in, Christina?
1 second. Calling you out of New York.
New York. Yeah, okay. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead. We're hearing you fine.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm calling you out of New York City.
Yeah, go ahead with your question or comment.
Okay, great. Actually, I just wanted to bring up something that I don't know if you wanted to discuss it or if it wasn't really a question. It was just kind of an observation. The legal tender laws for the Federal Reserve, if that's like it's a kind of a multi-pronged question. The legal tender law, from my understanding, is the first barrier toward relinquishing the Fed's control of our currency system. And if that happens, I was just curious, what is really the best alternative? I mean, I'm of the opinion that it would have to be multi-pronged approach. The United States of America can actually print its own U.S. money, as described in the Monetary Reform Act, and then you could issue competing currencies, and the free market would take care of their accountability, because there would naturally be a need in the market for having certain types of validation services that test the integrity or tell about the integrity of the different currencies. So I was just curious about some people's thoughts, your thoughts, discussion on the best alternative to the Federal Reserve in a way that's obviously going to get rid of the injustices that system provides or causes.
Well, I don't know enough about it to discuss it in that detail. So but I mean, I can make one comment about the Federal Reserve kind of in a broader way. And then in what you're talking about, what we can do is who do you like or trust as a voice on this? Because what we could do is get a couple of people who agree on some things and don't on others, and get them both as guests. For example, we've had Jane DeRista on before. She's written the history of the Fed. She went back and analyzed. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. I was thinking somebody like Catherine Austin Fitts.
Yeah, I know Catherine, yeah.
Okay,
yeah, that's a good idea. We'll approach Catherine and Jane, and we'll get Catherine and Jane together. And then everyone that's watching, and Christina, you could do the same, is send us questions about the Fed you'd like us to do on that show. And maybe we'll do a live phone-in like this, but with Jane and Catherine as guests. But we will do this. In terms of a broader issue of the Fed, my own view. I mean, the starting point on the Fed is that it plays a public role, but it has essentially controlled by private banks. The president appoints the head of the Fed, but I don't think there's ever been an appointment that Wall Street hasn't agreed with, and we know the Fed is sort of a revolving door, not completely, but to a large extent, of people that come in and go out of Wall Street.
I mean, Hank Paulson.
Yeah.
Take your pick.
Yeah, and then they also, under both with Clinton and with Obama and with Bush, they wound up in Treasury, and so the first thing is that there needs to be a central bank with a public interest mandate, and which is transparent and is accountable to Congress. And I mean, those are obvious basics. In and of itself, it doesn't solve everything. I mean, there's lots of, Canada has that kind of a bank. The European central banks are more or less like that. Just doing that doesn't solve the underlying problems of the economy, but it's certainly an important piece of a solution. In terms of currency and all that, I don't want to venture there. I don't know enough about it to say, but as I say, we can do a show about it.
Right on. Okay. Yeah. Just one more follow-up comment. With the printing of central bank money, yes, the Constitution that says the only thing in the Constitution that should be nationalized for sure is the creation of currency, coin, gold and silver coin through the Congress. So I personally think that if you do something like the Monetary Reform Act, paper, if it's debt-free issued notes that's accountable to the public, which we're the people. Then there's no reason why you can't have that, in addition to the market and Congress creating its own coin.
Yeah.
So it's like you have all these options. As long as it's, with the issuance of U.S. notes, if it's debt-free, that makes all the difference in the world. And anyway, there's just some food, I guess, for some people.
Yeah, those are good questions. I mean, the other thing I want to do more work on is that the extent to which the current global economy is not in complete crash mode because of the trillions and trillions of dollars that the Fed has loaned out to American banks, big American corporations, foreign banks, which on the one hand you can say is a good thing because millions and millions more people aren't unemployed and losing their lives and livelihoods. On the other hand, what does it mean about the global economy if you don't have all this trillions of cash being flushed into the system, that the system is completely broken? It means the global economy is completely artificial. I mean, we know that the derivatives market is, if I understand it correctly, is something like 3 times the global GDP. The amount of capital involved in pure speculation, and the whole economy is essentially being, the Ponzi scheme aspect of the economy has become completely dominant. Yes, the Fed helps to prop that up, but it's not new. You go back into the crisis of 1900. And the amount of concentration of ownership by banks and the role of speculation in giving rise to the crisis in the 1930s. This is something fundamental about how this capitalist economic system works right now. And yeah, the Fed plays a very important managing role in it, and we need to understand it. So we will do more about it. Thanks very much.
Sounds good. Yeah, just a clarification, minor thing. Well, actually, it's a major thing. I always refer to it as crony capitalism. Pure capitalism actually is it's the only ethical system that we have ever had so far. So,
well, except let me ask you one thing about true capitalism. Where did it ever exist?
It was here in the United States before we had a central bank controlling money, and we did have money.
Take a look at the crisis. Take a look at the crisis of 1873. Almost a decade-long deep depression. Very similar to the situation now, sparked by actually I think it was a silver/gold crisis in Europe that then spread to the United States. I think
we have to be forward thinking as well in our solutions, because it's like, it's about responsibility too. At that time, we didn't have the tools to be able to communicate. Things are now happening. Things happen in real time today because we have communication. We have communication like any direction and many people to many people. So if we have if we take advantage of the fact that we have the ability to communicate on this level now, and be proactive about our approach to ensuring that that we are not misinformed about banking we take that responsibility up, I think that we have a possibility for a very positive future.
But when you say
So
true capitalism, pure capitalism, do you, under this model you envision, are there monopolies?
No, it's impossible because the government is separate from the market.
All right, so you don't think monopolies are possible without the role of government? You don't think monopolies would emerge on their own?
Monopoly, no. Monopoly is only possible with government because the monopoly exists with the assistance of the people making public policy. If you look at the history record, if you look at policy as it evolves, people who benefit from the passing of certain legislation end up being the larger corporations who end up obtaining large market share.
And has there ever been that? Has there ever been a capitalism where big money didn't control government?
Where big money didn't control government. Then again, you have to address many issues. You have to address the central bank.
No, but I'm just asking you: has the capitalist model you imagine, has it ever existed, or it's something you would like to exist?
I have never really seen like the exact example of it, but the theory is out there, and the model is there, and we have all the ability now. And if you want to get to a place that's better than where we are, first you have to imagine how it is that the money system in our country is supposed to work. We have to understand that. It's so basic.
Okay, well, listen, write me a note. You can, my email is pretty straightforward, just paul@therealnews.com. Write me a note and tell me who you think articulates this vision the best that you like, and we'll get them on and we'll kind of have a debate about some of these ideas.
Okay, I'm sure there's like tons of stuff out there. I'm just maybe not as well versed in that part of history.
No, that's fine. No, send me somebody that you like and respect that articulates these issues, and we'll try to get them.
Okay. All right then.
Okay, good. Thanks very much for joining us.
All right, Paul. Thanks. Bye.
Great. Okay, so don't forget, this is part of our fundraising campaign. So we're trying to get to $200,000. Every dollar you give, we have a matching donor that will match that buck. If you sign up for a monthly subscription, our donors have agreed to match a year of your donation. So, like in other words, if you give $20 monthly, they're going to give us an immediate $240. So it'd be great if you sign up monthly, because that's what sustains us. So you can click the donate button, or you can phone if you want to donate, 866-396-4231. And if you want to call in with a question, the number is 888-543-1405. Do we have the question number up there? Maybe we do. 888-543-1405. And Twitter is #TheRealNews, and you can go to our Facebook page, The Real News on Facebook. And let's go to another questioner. So am I going to Bert Shook now? Yes. Yes, I am. Bert, are you there? Hello, Bert.
Hello, I'm here, Paul. Thank you.
Good. Thanks for joining us. So tell us a little bit about who you are and where you are.
I'm a retired construction project manager. I'm in North Bay in the San Francisco area, actually about an hour north in the wine country, Sonoma.
Oh, that's beautiful up there. You're lucky.
It is indeed.
Yeah, go ahead.
My interest has been in cultural anthropology and other areas of that humanistic endeavor. However, I made my money in construction. I'm enjoying a retirement here, believe me.
So do you have a question or a comment?
I sure do. One of my notions is that there are some crux issues involved in maintaining a healthy democracy, and it just seems that at times we need to focus on these with a laser-like accuracy. And one of them that stands out to me, at least, is the educational system. It seems like a dual ideology when a nation pats itself on the back and says that they have the best educational system in the world on the one hand, while underfunding and supporting a great dichotomy and disparity in our educational system. So my question is that there seem to be, even during economic abundance, there are poor school districts and wealthy school districts. Why is there not a system of collecting those school taxes and then equally distributing those funds or redistributing those funds equally according to the student population in K through 12 programs at least? I really can't fathom the idea that one could live in a wealthy neighborhood and have the best schools possible, while across town someone lives in a poor neighborhood and has virtually no access to the culture, at least through education.
Yeah, we're going to take this up in this Baltimore project. Baltimore is a real perfect example of this problem, where the school system in downtown Baltimore, where poor people live, is terribly underfunded, it's violent, and the lack of a tax base in Baltimore plays somewhat of a role, but behind that is lack of political will, obviously. But you know, people move out to the county, which is a separate. Baltimore is an independent city, so it doesn't get access to the tax base in the neighborhoods all surrounding the city where people live. So there's a kind of almost ethnic cleansing going on downtown. We're boarded up housing and falling apart school system, and then people that have the dough get out to the county where there's better schools. And then, of course, in many cities, as you know, it's a public-private school two-tier system where people have the dough, they just put the kids into private school and they don't give a damn what happens to the public school system. So we're going to be doing more on this. We've done some stories on No Child Left Behind and Race to the Top and what that's done to the public school system. You know, supposedly standardized testing and all this was supposed to even out academic achievement and delivery, but according to most teachers, at least, it has not. You know, it's put all this onus on testing and not on teaching.
Well, I think the focus might need to be, all of these are important issues regarding the inequality in the system, but that inequality starts with the distribution of taxes. And I can understand why people move to areas simply because there's better schools, if they can afford to. That also sounds ridiculous on the face of it in a democracy that really needs to redistribute the wealth on a more equitable basis. And the flaw in that system, and it will be perpetuated as long as the taxes for a rich school district return directly to that district or are not pooled and redistributed throughout the school population.
Yeah, I mean, that's so obvious and rational, but it ain't where the political power is. I mean, what we want to do more and more at the Real News, and this is our new kind of tagline, you know, don't roll over, take over. We want to do news for people who want to take over. There's not going to be any real change, you know, on any front, but you know, we're talking about schools right now. If people don't take over their local politics, take over their state politics, take over the political parties or create new ones, people have to get engaged in taking over the system. And you know, there needs to be some combination, I personally think, between, you know, movements with political strategies. That movements without political strategies are just lobby groups. Political strategy without movements, those candidates get eaten for breakfast by the system. But somehow there needs to be both. And our role in this as the Real News is to try to create a fact base for public policy that makes sense, that people can fight for, and report on people who are fighting for it. I mean, what you're saying is, I mean, it's if you wanted a democracy, and that's the big if, because the elites, I don't think that's clearly not their priority. If you wanted a democracy, the first thing you would do is make sure you had a good public school system.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, anything else you want to get at now, or we could come back to you a little bit later?
I'll be here if you want to come back. Absolutely.
Okay. All right, we're going to go to a phone call in just a second, but let me remind you, this is part of our $200,000 fundraising campaign. If you've just joined us or you need a little more nagging, please click the donate button. We got to hit this matching. We're going to lose this donation, matching donation the end of December. We still got a little ways to go. So if you haven't clicked donate, please do it while you're listening now. If you want to phone in, it's 866-396-4231. If you want to mail a check, just click on the donate button and you'll see the address where to mail a check. Okay, we're going to go to caller now. We're going to Adam. He's in St. John, Newfoundland. St. John, how are you, Adam?
Good. First things first, Paul, it's Newfoundland, not Newfoundland.
Yeah, but I'm from Toronto. We don't know how to say it.
Yeah, freaking mainlander.
Yeah, I mean, Torontonians don't, listen, you know Torontonians. We don't, you know, Toronto's the center of the universe.
Right. I wanted to, first starters, I love your plan to have local issues in a systemic national way. I heard that part earlier, and I'm really happy you guys are doing that.
Thank you.
I'm already looking into getting ways to donate now. Just wondering, what are you doing? I know you're doing some stuff in a North American cluster, but I find when you categorize things as North American, it often means that Canadian issues get left out and are put on the back burner vis-a-vis the American issues, where America's a bigger country and economy and what have you. What are you guys doing to ensure that Canadian news stories are still being produced? Do you have a bureau in Canada? More correspondence? Like, what's the game plan?
All right, well, we've made a deal with Prism Magazine, which is a magazine created by Mahar Rar. If you remember Mahar, he was the Canadian of Syrian descent who was sent by rendition to Syria.
Yeah.
He started something called Prism Magazine, and we're going to be cooperating with him, co-financing a full-time journalist in Ottawa. We're going to be advertising that job in January. And that will mostly concentrate on foreign policy, national security kind of issues, but with a mostly Canadian angle and from Ottawa. And then we have a possibility of with a cable TV in Toronto, of having a series of rotating town halls in different parts of Toronto. And so we're working at raising money. It's all about money for us, so in terms of being able to do this. So we're looking for raising the money to hire a couple of producers that over 6 months will produce a series of debates, and we'll particularly take up the issue of privatization, what's happening in terms of the public sector workers in Toronto and Ontario, but also other issues. But our big issue is we just need to raise enough money to hire one full-time Canadian correspondent to start with, who can do national stories, can go anywhere in Canada and do report, and then build a Canadian bureau. You know, this project began in Toronto, and more than half of us are still Canadian at the Real News. But we always felt that in terms of sort of the global importance of things, we had to dig in the U.S., we had to be in Washington, and we have to have a strong presence here. We certainly are not giving up on covering Canada. On the contrary, we're just kind of going to rallying the resources, we hope in the next few months, that we can start building a proper Canadian bureau.
All right, neat.
And let me just add, if there's Canadians listening that want to donate specifically towards a Canadian producer, you can do that. When you donate, there's a little drop-down box, and you can click Canada in that box, and we'll kind of set that money aside and put it towards a Canadian producer's salary.
Fantastic. Even like, so I take it then you're first going to focus on Ontario and likely then Quebec, and then you're going to focus on the bigger provinces.
Well, and listen, if we get a donor with some, if you know any bigger donors that want us to concentrate in the East Coast, we'll be happy to do that too. It doesn't have to be Toronto, but it's kind of the obvious place to start.
Listen, I'm not picky, dude. I'm actually fantastic. I would like to echo the comments that it's fantastic that you guys are doing this. Because I would argue the mainstream media situation is actually worse in Canada than it is in the United States.
It's more monopolized.
Far more.
Yeah, Americans don't know that. The Canadian media concentration of ownership is off the charts. It's like, what, 3-4 big companies essentially own all the mainstream media. And the
and are with a gutted private, with a public sector that is incredibly gutted.
Yeah.
Public broadcaster that is incredibly gutted.
What sort of issues would you like us to take up in terms of
let's see. I love the labor stuff. I love the grassroots activism stuff. I love the discussions of climate change and all that stuff. I wouldn't mind seeing some more stuff about students and the student movement, about the elimination of tuition fees, maybe dealing with poor professors focusing more on their own interests and injecting their interest into the classroom rather than giving students basic fundamentals to do proper research and critical thinking. I also think another issue that would be great for students would be to the issue of having less full-time professors and more per-course instructors who are who by definition are less skilled, less teachered, less able at teaching, but are unfortunately we have to rely more on per-course instructors because I'm an arts major, and I find that a lot of the focus goes on more professional degrees, like such as engineering and sciences, and the more liberal arts degrees often find themselves having to rely on less funding, and more of the funding is earmarked more towards business students. I know I'm rambling here, but basically...
No, it's an important area for us. I mean, one of the things that's interesting about Baltimore, and it may indirectly help in terms of even covering these issues from a Canadian perspective, but there's an enormous student population in Baltimore. There's something like 15 degree or 16 degree granting colleges and universities in Baltimore, a big student population. So we're hoping to kind of develop a whole side of covering student issues. And then there's no reason why we couldn't be doing the same thing in Canada. And we also want to do more work with freelancers too. So students that are listening to this that know how to shoot video and edit, and you want to help us with some of these stories, you should get in touch with us. Anyway, thanks very much, Adam. Thanks for calling.
My pleasure. Keep up the good work.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Okay, so I'm being told I need to, what am I pitching, the donations or the donations? Okay, don't forget about donating, guys. It's at 866-396-4231. And the donate button's the easiest way to do this, or you can click donate and find out where to send a check. Again, 866-396-4231 is the number for donating. And now we're going to go to Megan. Megan has it's a video question from Megan? No, okay. Someone has submitted a question on video, so we're going to play you their question, and then I guess I'll try to respond to it. So are we ready to roll this now? Okay, go ahead, roll it.
Thank you for having me, Paul. So my question is, looking from United States citizen point of view, what is the most effective way to bring a real change in Israel and Palestine conflict? I mean, what are the things Israel and United States governments are mostly afraid of? And second, in your opinion, how effective are the recent freedom flotillas in bringing actual change on the ground? Thank you.
Okay, so it's back to me. All right, now I didn't actually hear the question because the way we're set up, technically we had a little hitch and I didn't get to hear it, but I've been told it's about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, a little bit what do I think is the solution. Well, this is obviously a great big question, and there's no easy answer to what is the solution. I mean, the obvious first part of the solution is there needs to be a transformation in U.S. foreign policy. In terms of what we can influence here, in theory at least, it'd be American-Canadian policy towards Israel and Palestine, which obviously is completely one-sided in support of Israel. There is some divisions that are taking place in that. The Netanyahu and Likud in Israel are very closely aligned to the Republican Party. On the other hand, within the Democratic Party, there is such strong influence of not just money, but history, in terms of people finding their political careers linked to this sort of unwavering support for Israeli policy, which they try to equate with support for Israel. And there's, of course, this sense that amongst Jews, there's this monolithic feeling, North American Jews, of, Israel right or wrong. And that's not true. It may be true for some of the organizations that get the most media coverage, like AIPAC and others. But what we're finding, and in fact we're going to be doing a story on this very soon, the North American Jewish community is actually quite divided on this issue, and there's a large number of Jews, if you based on polling and other such, that actually do not support these kinds of the occupation or apartheid-type policies within Israel. What we're trying to do with the Real News, and this is the work of Leah Terechansky mostly, in the Middle East, in Palestine and Israel. She's based in Tel Aviv, but she does a lot of work in the West Bank, and have been and will work more with some journalists in Gaza. But we're trying to kind of factually unravel some of the mythology that Jews and others have in North America about Israel. The idea that, as Netanyahu said recently, and if you watch one of Leah's recent stories on the fight for human rights in Israel, this idea that there's a real democracy in Israel and that the Arabs in Israel or Palestinians in Israel actually have rights or equal rights and all of that, it's simply factually not correct, both in law and even more so in practice. We're trying to unravel some of the mythology, and so that people here being mostly United States, where so much of this is being determined, can get past some of the illusions about the situation there. We're not trying to look at this through rose-colored glasses either. It doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of the criticism, and let me put it this way, not all criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic, but some is. And we don't have illusions about that. We know some of the critique about Israel is racist, comes out of the 20th, 19th century, or even 2,000 years if you want, of hatred for Jews in European culture. But let me stress European culture more than Arab culture. Not that there isn't anti-Semitism, or I shouldn't say anti-Semitism, there isn't hatred for Jews within Arab culture, there is. But nothing compared to what there was and is in Europe and in America and Canada. And, but that being said, that's some criticism of Israel is based on hatred of Jews. That isn't where most of the critique comes from. So it's a complicated issue. Our role in it is to try to deal with a fact base in terms of the Middle East and try to get a realistic picture of what life is like both in Israel and under the occupation. Okay, so it's a bit of where we're headed in terms of our commitment to do that. Now we're going to go to, am I going to a caller? It's a phone caller. This phone caller is an interesting call. This is Megan. Megan is an intern of the Real News. Full-time, and she's been working with us on our Baltimore stories, and she was born and grew up in Baltimore, downtown Baltimore. Thanks for joining us, Megan.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for having me on.
So Megan started working with us just a few months ago, and she's already worked on some stories with David about both youth, particularly youth in the criminal justice system in Baltimore. So Megan, you got a comment, a question?
Yeah, so my comment is, or my comment / question is, first of all, I just want to talk about a couple of the things that I enjoy about Baltimore and some of the things that I hope to see the Real News kind of cover in the near future. But I don't know, I feel like Baltimore has one of the more, the growing organizing communities, and I would love to see the Real News kind of cover some of the actions and some of the occupations that are taking place here and some of the things that people are out protesting and organizing around. One of those things being youth in the criminal justice system, something that we've talked about on the Real News numerous times. But I would love to see the Real News cover something such as, the youth in the school-to-prison pipeline, in layman's terms, of youth being funneled from the school system, which basically looks like prison, into the prison system, which is already, the industrial complex is pretty large at this point. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's something that we're Megan, we're very interested in this. We're going to be doing a series of stories on both the public school system and jails. One of the couple of stories we're working on now is the role of prison labor as cheap labor and how that is used. We're also going to be looking at who makes money out of building more prisons. There's a shortage. We're doing a story on recreational centers in Baltimore right now, which I think as many as 9 may be closed down in 2012, and they're talking about privatizing some of them. there's so lack of funds for recreational facilities and for schools. At the same time, there's plans to build a new $100 million youth prison, and I think it's maybe as much as a $200 million new women's prison in Baltimore. So there's money for prisons, but there's not money for schools and recreation. So we're going to be digging into that story, and Megan, of course, is going to be working with us on it. Megan, what else should we be working on in Baltimore?
Well, right now we're on the road as we speak, going out and interviewing people about the rec center story that you just brought up, and talking to parents and youth who will be affected by the rec centers being closed down and being privatized in the city. But in the future, we're hoping to be able to cover some of the things that were brought up during our town hall that we held in Baltimore in October. And some of those things entailed like community members wanting us to delve more into where the money goes for these institutions that are in neighborhoods like colleges such as Johns Hopkins or other large institutions that are taking over and buying up a lot of the properties that are in the city that are vacant, that the city has been sitting on for over like 30 years or something like that.
Right.
So those are the type of things that I'm hoping that we can cover.
Yeah, actually, that's a story that we'll be showing soon. We did a town hall a few weeks ago about young people being charged as adults in Baltimore and this whole issue of building this new youth prison. So that's a story we'll be running soon. The town hall's taking place. We're just finishing the editing on that. That's great. Well, we look forward to your story on the recreational centers, Megan. Thanks for joining us.
All right. Thanks for having me. All right.
Okay, now I'm just going to check. So is there anything else in terms of that? No? All right, good. Well, so this is a new format for us, and it seems to have worked out pretty well. So I think we're going to do this with some more regularity. Let us know if you like this live kind of interaction and phone in. And let us know some guests that you'd be interested in seeing on a live show that you could call in and ask questions of. Just again, let me tell you a little bit of some of our plans. We'll be continuing our work with Leah in Palestine and Israel. We have the new Cairo Bureau with Jihan and Reed, and Dania is there. In March, we have a donor who's going to help us, and we're going to be establishing a full-time correspondent in China. And this is all in the pipeline. We need support to have a full-time journalist covering Latin America. So that's something you might think about helping us specifically with. We're going to be, as I said earlier, we're going to be doing more work from Capitol Hill, from Congress, and trying to get past the theater and the soap opera to the conflict of real interests, and cover Capitol Hill from the point of view of ordinary people, or interests of ordinary people. We'll be continuing our work on the economy and deepening the analysis of the causes and the solutions for the crisis, and including more debate, not just interviews. We're also going to spend more time on climate change, both in terms of debate and reports on the science and the politics. And of course, our Baltimore project, which is the Real Baltimore. Sometimes we call it the Real Baltimore, picking up where the wire left off. Although people from Baltimore, many are not, feel a little ambiguous about the wire because they feel it only showed the sort of dark side, and Baltimore's a complex place. So we hope to bring you more real news, and as we've said, this is don't roll over, take over. We want to do news for people who want to take over. And if you're in the process of taking over a city, a school board, a union, a school, a state, who knows, let us know, because we think you're making news. Don't forget, if you want to donate, please, I just hit something, please click the donate button over here. You can phone 866-396-4231. I'll do it again, 866-396-4231. And if you're watching this and you haven't been watching live, which is possible because we're reaching the end of the live broadcast now, we're going to be replaying this. We'll post this up on the site, and people can watch it when they like. Just know that you can't phone in terms of questions and all that, but you can phone in for donating, or you can click donate, or email contact@therealnews.com, and we'll try to answer your questions. And again, let us know if you like this format, because if so, we could try doing this perhaps once a week or so. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for donating, thank you for supporting, thank you for viewing, because without you, we can't make real news. And thanks for joining us on the Real News Network.